We're going to spend about 45 minutes here. I always hate being the last speaker before lunch. It's a really dangerous thing to do. And if you had ever met my daughter, you would understand why. So I'm Alan Morrison. I'm with a firm in Philadelphia. My partner, Steve Fishman, and I have been in this space now about 30 years, serially investing in ancillary companies servicing the nursing home and senior housing space. We're currently active in current investments and, all good things. Was asked by our friends at the eCap to chair this panel, and I invited these four really smart people that know a lot more about the business than I do because they do it every day. So let me first introduce them. David Navazio from Gentell, which is a wound care company. Tony Munoz of Cantor, Fitzgerald, an investment banker that buys and sells things on behalf of his clients. Avi Grossman, who runs PDI, a portable X-ray company servicing nursing homes. And Schabes, who is a regulatory attorney that probably represents 75% of the people at this conference. Maybe only 50, but anyhow. Why don't I ask each of them to take a minute and sort of tell you a little bit about what they do on a day-to-day basis without making it a commercial, or at least not too much of a commercial. And then I'm going to move into some Q&A of these folks and then open it up later for questions from the audience, because you got better questions than I do. So David, introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is David Navazio. I'm the president and CEO of Gentell. And I am really honored to be here at eCap, and I'm also honored to lead such a great wound care provider, providing total wound care solutions to nursing homes across the country, and I do it with an amazing group of clinicians and an amazing team.
Hi, my name is Tony Munoz. I'm an investment banker at a firm called Cantor Fitzgerald. I help lead their healthcare services banking effort. 20 plus years covering the space, and I spent a lot of time covering ancillary healthcare companies. So recent transactions include selling Next Level to Aramark, working with HIG on the acquisition of Reliant, and I've got a couple of other ancillary businesses out in the market. But I help companies raise money in addition to buy other companies that get bigger.
Good morning, my name is Avi Grossman. I'm the president of PDI Health. We are a national portable X-ray company, currently servicing 14 states. Providing national portable X-ray to across the country.
I'm Alan Schabes. I'm a partner with Benesch Friedlander, which is a national firm. I've been a transactional and regulatory lawyer for close to 40 years, and on the transactional side have represented many different types of players in the healthcare industry, including lots of different types of players within the post-acute care spectrum, nursing homes, home health, hospice. And on the regulatory side, I've had the dubious pleasure of having to negotiate many different settlements with the Office of Inspector General and the Department of Justice when things are not going particularly well. So I'm delighted to be here today and talk about ancillary ventures and things that you should be doing and things that you really shouldn't be doing.
So Alan's real job is to keep me from saying something to get in trouble. Okay? So that's it. So I'm going to lead it off with a question here. Asking David and Avi, both of who run ancillary service companies, a couple of questions. First of all, how, David's providing Part B wound care supplies and associated services. Avi's providing portable X-ray and related services. How often do you see nursing homes providing the services that you two guys provide?
Almost never. It's really, in the portable X-ray space, there's very minimal X-rays in the nursing home, and the costs to operate and to staff technicians really, it makes no sense. So it's not something that nursing homes actually do.
So one thing I forgot to mention is we're really limiting our talk today about clinical ancillaries, not things like housekeeping, food service, support services. We're really talking about things that are patient-touching, patient-facing, or something like that. I should have mentioned it, so I'm going back in time, and I mentioned it at the beginning, okay? So anyhow, David, how about you? How often do you see nursing homes, providing, Part B wound care dressings and supplies to their patients?
A couple facilities will be doing it, a couple chains will be doing it, but it's really nothing that's, prevalent. when you think of wound care, it's not transactional. I mean, there's no wound care dressing that's a magic dressing that works. It's really a service program, and that's how you really get the best benefit, out of wound care. So if it were just, simply getting boxes of dressings, yeah, I guess anybody could do it. But to really be able to give facilities the type of outcomes that they need, the type of outcomes that patients should have, then you really need to have, a total wound care solution that really is all different, disciplines in patient care that are involved.
So I think Avi and David, you kind of answered my next question, which is why or why not do you think you don't see nursing homes providing these services? They're not profitable enough, channel conflicts, too hard to run, they can't find the people, they don't make any money, and all that stuff. I mean, you want to elaborate at all?
Well, yeah, the costs to run your own X-rays, just the equipment alone, the staff, having technicians doing it 24 hours a day is just, it's unreasonable. So you really need a condensed area in order to be successful. And a typical nursing home cannot support the costs or even the headache of dealing with having staff and techs.
David, same question?
Until Gentell started handling about 1,000 customers, we couldn't provide the level of service that, our competitor, large competitor out in California was providing. So you really need to have, a lot of buildings, you need to have a lot of employees, in order to provide, the type of, wound care support that, you should have.
Okay. I want to sort of turn now to Alan and Tony and ask them a couple questions. So in no particular order, I'll look at Tony first. So, what ancillary services do you see SNFs providing the most commonly, either under direct ownership or through some, co-investment or something like that? What services, Tony, do you see?
And to step back, ancillary businesses like David and Avi operates, I mean, they're more important now than ever before. That industry has been growing, and the primary reason why is because the patients that every one of these operators are caring for nowadays are sicker, so the acuity level is higher, so they need these types of services. Also, this is a way for these operators to differentiate themselves in the market, right? To care for sicker patients, but be able to look at a referral base or a payer and say, we're able to provide the best outcomes at a lower price. So these industries are growing, and they're more essential now than ever before. Right now, very few operators do this in-house. I mean, the big guys like the Genesis of the world, Manor Cares, they built them from scratch many years ago. But right now, most of these operators outsourcing it for all the reasons that David and Avi mentioned, which is they don't have the size and the scale to do it. But right now, the most important clinical services include, Part B products and services, dialysis, wound care, contract therapy, and obviously pharmacy is the big one.
Alan, same question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are certain essential services that nursing homes provide that at least intuitively make sense for nursing homes to try to control in some way, shape, or form. And those would include primary care, having doctors that come into the nursing home or businesses that have nurse practitioners to come into the nursing home. As Tony mentioned, pharmacy, a very, very big outlay for nursing homes, certainly on the Part A side, contract therapy, and there are other ancillary services that are related to post-acute care that lots of nursing home companies are looking at, some for the right reasons and some not so much for the right reasons. And what I'm referring to are long-term care companies that are developing a spectrum of services along the post-acute care spectrum. And that would include home health, that would include hospice, that would include inpatient rehab. Some of them are doing LTACs. And the question is, why are they looking to do that? Now, if you're looking to do that because you want to differentiate yourselves from others and to make yourselves more attractive to the payers, that's a very good fact. You know, one of the aspects that we'll talk about later in the talk today is the whole concept of population health and value-based care. And that's a big deal. If you read the materials that are being put out by CMMI, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Innovations, it's all about population health and value-based. And there are companies around, not many of them, that are very much focused on that and realize that if they just have nursing home beds, they have almost no ability to meaningfully participate in any kind of a population health initiative. So they want to have the modalities of care of home care and hospice, inpatient rehab, so that they can move the people along and have them be in the right site of care at the right time for the lowest cost alternative. And if you're doing it for that kind of a purpose, then absolutely, then looking into the ancillary ventures is something that makes sense and something that is regulatorily attractive to the government and regulatorily attractive to anybody who might be investigating it. But if at the end of the day, you're looking to get into ancillary ventures because you want, and I can say things in here because although I represent a number of people in this room, but I'm not going to identify anybody by name, but if you are getting into this business because you want to take advantage of your referral stream, that is a bad idea. That is not something that the government sanctions. We'll talk about an advisory opinion that the Office of Inspector General issued right before Thanksgiving to put a gigantic knife in the heart of a lot of joint ventures, and they did it quite deliberately so. And so we'll talk about the kinds of things that the government hates about these joint ventures, and we'll talk a lot more about the kinds of things that they want to see as part of these joint ventures. But if you are focusing on those kinds of things that I mentioned in terms of primary care, pharmacy, therapy, things that are meaningful in terms of the operation and the cost, those are where we're seeing most of the activity today.
Thanks, Alan. Now that you scared everybody here, I'm not sure it's okay, but I'll ask some other questions of Tony. So, Tony, when you take a company out to market, an ancillary company, maybe you're selling a pharmacy company, a therapy company, home health company or whatever, how often do you see SNF operators kind of in that process, bidding on them, wanting to buy them, versus starting up or maybe not coming into the space at all? So,
most of the time, there is no engagement from an operator. The folks that are investing in the ancillary businesses are either fellow ancillary companies who are looking to gain more size and scale and synergies, and it's private equity. In the last 2 years alone, I've seen more interest from private equity to invest in the space. Examples, we have Webster Capital bought a company called Integrated Rehab. We saw Winrose acquire a business called Bluestone, which was a physician business into the SNFs. And then there's a number of other private equity activity around the pharmacy space. But most of the time, no SNF engagement, because of their either capital constrained or their recognition that they can't do the service line as well as these gentlemen.
got it. Do you see any of, Alan and Tony, do you see, as we talk about value-based care and whatever the latest acronym out of Washington is, do you see the environment changing in terms of the entry of SNFs into ancillaries? You see, Alan, I think it's kind of clear from your last comment about the OIG's opinion that they kind of wanted to put a dagger in the heart of some stuff. Tony, you see there's just a lot of money, in private equity competing for everything. Do you see that turning around? Do you see that going on for a while? How do you see that ebb and flowing? If I were a SNF operator and I wanted to be in home care for the right reasons, because it was a good continuity of care, and good service, what do you see happening? Would I be better starting it? Would I be better buying it? Would I be better hoping?
Well, look, Tony knows this much better than I do, but, the private equity players and the financial players and even some of the strategics have an insatiable desire to grow bigger and to have a platform, and they understand that the concept of ventures or ancillary ventures created by nursing home companies is a very, very fruitful kind of incubator to have these companies, developed and grown and achieve a degree of scale. So to the extent that people are involved in these kind of ancillary ventures, with an eye to a liquidity event at some point down the road where they're going to have a liquidity event with respect to either a strategic player or a financial player, yeah, that's a reality, because I don't see that level of interest going to, it may diminish. Some of the multiples may go down from the ridiculous levels that they've been at for the last year or so, but it's still going to be lucrative and people are still going to look at it. But again, if you're getting into this business to have a liquidity event, we need to talk about that, because that's not exactly what I would say should be the main or even a primary motivating factor for anyone getting into these kinds of ventures.
Tony, you want to?
The SNF industry, I think, is the most resilient industry in healthcare of any of the ecosystems in healthcare
everybody
services.
give yourself a hand then, because you're all in the SNF industry, and you're still standing or sitting at the moment, but you know what I mean.
Years of reimbursement cuts, and even through a pandemic, you guys are still here. And look, I think there's a recognition from both payers, private equity, and providers that this is an essential part of the ecosystem. Patients are not going to suddenly go to the home. There's a need for this service line. And so I bring that up because now the conversations I'm having with very large companies like the Team Health and the Sounds of the world who are providing physician services in the hospital, they want to follow that patient across the continuum, right? Like, how do you take risk or do any value-based, arrangement if you're not following the patient in the 3 or 4 days in the hospital until the final 60 days in a SNF setting? So look, I think a lot of the activity we're seeing in the ancillaries are companies getting bigger, but also being prepared for that value-based partnership with payers to provide better outcomes at a lower price.
Yeah.
So before I come back to you guys with a couple more regulatory finance questions, let me go back to David and Avi, who do this every day, on the ground, get phone calls at 3 a.m. from, irate directors in nursing and stuff like that, et cetera, or the people that work for them do. So look, the last couple of years have been, anywhere from brutal to impossible for nursing home operators. Pick an issue, staffing, costs, pandemic, you name it, reimbursement cuts. Other than that, it's been a really easy time. So in your business, Avi, in the X-ray business first, and then David, in your business, what are you doing differently now that you weren't doing 2 or 3 years ago? To take care of, to take care of your nursing home customers and their patients?
Well, I look at it, when I started 14 years ago, it was a total different animal. I mean, a facility called in an X-ray, we had a day or two to do it, and if it was a stat or critical, the facility just sent them to the hospital. It wasn't a big deal. They even preferred it. In today's environment, where we're faced with so many challenges, from rehospitalization to the COVID and everything that's going on, we have to run a fast-paced business, and we have to strategize on how to streamline, from the nurses being able to order online, or whether it's the phone, whatever is the quickest way possible. For us to have our techs, on their feet 24 hours, no matter if it means a building has COVID and there's 17 patients in it that we have to do, it's just a very fast environment right now, and we have to, we can never take a step back. And there's a lot of, different pieces to the puzzle, from speeding up the ordering system to results to dealing with radiologists. Dealing with, especially today, with our technicians going into buildings that are full of COVID, and they go into 10, 12 buildings a day, and 3 days later they're out for 2 weeks. So it's really different in today's environment. Even pre-COVID, just with all the regulations with rehospitalization, we really had to step up and just change things around to, a facility needs an X-ray, we have to be there within 2-3 hours, and there's no more waiting.
So it's pretty simple. You just have to need to do it better, faster, and cheaper.
Better, faster, and I don't know, cheaper. It's been costing us a lot more now.
I know. David, same question. Kind of what's the last 3 years been in terms of your business? How's it affected it?
Well, it's certainly been very different You know, I've been doing this since the 80s.
He was in high school.
Yeah, I mean, I've been here a long time. A lot of the nursing home operators are giving me brochures now. And I've seen it when the big corporations, you know, owned and managed the nursing homes to what we are today with the operators. And COVID has really shaken the industry. And I think the nursing homes have really done an amazing job, but we're under attack. We're under attack. We've got some ex-governor that tried to blame COVID on the nursing home industry. We've got attention. We've got Congress, you know, wanting it. Besides Alan with all the regulatory stuff, we've got the public opinion. We've got Congress saying, you know, we want to take a look at nursing homes and see where they are making profit instead of rendering patient care.
Right.
So the difference is we completely understand nursing homes. We understand the operators today. And today, like every nursing home, you've got censuses down. You've got an incredible shortage of employees. And you're operating at a fixed reimbursement state. So what we try to do is to make it as easy as possible for nursing homes. We know they don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of time to waste. Their people don't have a lot of time. So when we come into a facility, we've got to make sure that we give them results, that we give them value, that we don't take up their time. And at the end of the day, they've got wound healing rates that are far better than if we weren't in the building, and they're saving money. That's what we've learned, and we've learned that more during COVID because of all the different challenges that we face.
So going back to that thing called the law, which, you know, kind of just is always out there. So let me go back to Alan, and I wanted to save this one because I want to give him a few minutes to go through it. So Alan, you know, you mentioned a little bit about the regulatory environment for investment in ancillaries, joint ventures, et cetera. You know, the DOJ's position, their last, I'll call it missile that they fired into the space. You know, give me your 3 or 5 top points that you would advise nursing home operators, you know, as they look at going at either some of these internal ancillaries in the buildings, therapy, pharmacy, or external to the building, hospice, home care, LTACs, et cetera. You know, give us some of your wisdom.
I'm not sure it's my wisdom, but I'll give you some of my experience. So it's interesting. I have probably looked at more than 50 joint ventures over the last 24 to 36 months. And without exaggeration, I will tell you that 10% were constructed very, very intelligently and well, and they were operated very, very well, and they were operated in the way that they were originally constructed. You have another 10% that were constructed with very good legal counsel, and when I looked at them 2 years out, they were not operated in any way, shape, or form close to the way that they were designed to operate. And we'll talk about that. And then I looked at the other 80%, and they were a holy mess. They were poorly constructed for reasons that we'll talk about in a few minutes. They were poorly operated, and frankly, they were really just waiting for someone to just take a shot at them in terms of an investigation. And that's not an exaggeration, because it just, people go into this business because the nursing home owners are under a lot of stress. They're looking for ways to differentiate their revenue. They're looking for, and it's understandable. I have a patient base. I own, let's just say I own 30, 40, 50, 60 nursing homes. I have thousands of patients that need pharmacy, that need home care, that need hospice, that need all lab services. And why shouldn't I get a piece of the action? And the answer is that if you look at it in a perfectly rational business standpoint, you really should take advantage of it. That's what America's all about. But there's something called the anti-kickback statute, which says that you cannot get anything of value for any of your referrals. So you have to put that kind of regulatory overview in terms of things that are going on. So let me share with you, and just in a few minutes, because I could talk about this for a couple of hours, which nobody wants to hear.
Are you kidding? People getting free legal advice from you? They'll stay
that's
for
right.
weeks.
That's when they came to when I came to EPEC, they said you can't charge while you're here. I go, okay, that's fine. That's why everybody's been coming over to talk to me for free. Anyway, so
My daughter's an attorney. I'm allowed to say things like that.
absolutely. So let's talk about some of the biggest mistakes that I see. Number one, there are a number of ventures that are co-owned by an industry player and a nursing home player. Let's just say you have a therapy provider, and there's this myth that if you have a 60-40 split between the therapy provider owning 40% and the nursing home owner owning 60%, that is somehow that's somehow the right way to go. I'm sorry, 60% owned by the therapy company, 40% owned by the nursing homes. The fact of the matter is that the 60-40 test that was designed by the Office of Inspector General it is unachievable, because both parties, both the therapy provider as well as the nursing home provider, is never going to qualify for that 60% of being a disinterested party. It is I've never, in 35 years plus of representing companies, have ever seen anybody other than a foreign investment company from Singapore that couldn't spell a nursing home that was actually disinterested enough to be in the 60%. So that's a common misnomer. Another common misnomer, and having been opposite the Office of Inspector General in a number of investigations, there are certain things that set them off, because they believe that they're smart business people. One can question that assumption, but they think that they're smart business people. And so one of the questions you're going to be asked is, let's go back to our therapy provider. And they're going to say, well, okay, so this joint venture was set up to take care of the therapy in, pick a state, in Virginia, okay? There are 40 homes in Virginia, and this therapy provider, this therapy joint venture was set up to take care of the therapy needs in Virginia. The question that they're going to ask you is the therapy provider, who is the joint venture partner, are they in the same business in Virginia? In other words, do they have their own outpatient business while they're a JV partner with the nursing homes for the therapy business in those homes? And if the answer is yes, that it is that they do essentially compete, the OIG finds that to be a terrible fact, because they can't understand how it makes any kind of sense, if you are doing these joint ventures for the right purpose and not to reward somebody for their referrals. It makes absolutely no commercial sense for a therapy provider to be in the same geographic area and competing essentially against their JV, other than the fact that the JV must have been designed to reward the nursing home for the referrals. So if you are involved in a JV where there is a competing entity who is your JV partner, that's a very bad fact. Very, very bad fact. Number two is when these joint ventures are incredibly undercapitalized. Every ancillary business, especially pharmacy, especially mobile X-ray, requires a significant degree of capital costs. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, if you're going to operate this business as a legitimate business. I cannot tell you how many joint ventures I have seen where the initial capital investment was under $1,000 from both parties. And the OIG is not a bunch of idiots. They're going to say $1,000, and what was your return in the first year? Oh, you made a $1,500% cash-on-cash return? That's really interesting. It made no commercial sense, but yet we see these kinds of things over and over again. And now, as a result of the missile that they fired in November, the concept of active involvement is evolving. In many of these joint ventures, even the ones that were set up correctly, what we see is that the nursing home partner is not really anything much more than a passive investor. In other words, we want you to be at the table. There'll be some certain supermajority kind of decisions that we can't make without you. But as far as the day-to-day kind of stuff, we want you to stay out of it. You don't do it. You'll just cash your check, come to meetings, and have a nice day. Well, the Office of Inspector General, essentially with the advisory opinion that they issued in November, has said, well, that's not going to pass muster anymore. We want, this is going to be a legitimate business, we expect that the nursing home folks are going to be involved on an active basis in terms of decision making and business planning. And this is an is an evolution, because even until very recently, it was very unusual to see these kinds of joint ventures where the nursing home companies were taking an active role. But now, given the kind of guidance and the evolving guidance that we see, and people unfortunately getting investigated, we see it being more of an imperative than something as a preferential. That's like 2 or 3. We can talk about more down the road, but those are 3 that stick out in my mind as common mistakes that I see with these kinds of joint ventures.
Hey, Alan, and just to bring this back to M&A, my standpoint, I mean, Alan and I talk about this all the time. I am bringing him in early in processes. So even before we launch a process, selling a company or raising money or talking to strategic parties, I'm having Alan review the contracts, review those partnerships.
Yeah.
Because the last thing we want is to be in the 8th inning of a deal. We're about to sign the dotted line, and then all of a sudden their lawyer goes, we discovered an issue here.
Oops.
And you tell me, Alan, that buyer or that private equity firm is going to be obligated to go, wait, we discovered issues here. We're going to have to report it. And so there's red flags all around. So again,
absolutely. I mean, I'll give you an example. There was a very large joint venture that just was taken out to market and got a call, and they said to me that, and one of the issues with these joint ventures is the amount of unrelated business that you have. And if the amount of unrelated to the nursing home company is like 90% or 100%, that's not a good fact. It's a very bad fact. And so in Tony's case, well, not the case, backing up on some of the things that Tony just mentioned, in this particular joint venture, their percentage of related business was 85%. And not only that, but they didn't really have a dedicated marketing plan to market to unrelated facilities. And I talked to the private equity fund, and a private equity fund, they don't like risk. They hate risk. They love opportunities. They're willing to pay incredible multiples on EBITDA, but they hate risk. And they called me up and they said, well, what do you think about this 85% related business? I said, that's a very bad fact. I said, what's even worse is that they don't really have a plan to expand the unrelated business. But Tony's right. If you're going to go out to market anytime soon, people, have to do their homework. They have to have these things looked at. And what's also very interesting is that we're getting contacted by private equity funds all over the place, and by certain kinds of REITs, depending on their portfolio that they have. And they want us to look at these things a year or 2 or 3 years out to make sure that they're being operated the way that they were designed. And this is not something that we didn't do this kind of work 2 or 3 years ago. It was unheard of to take a look at and do a kind of a checkup again. But as a result of some of the things that have happened in the investigations and the advisory opinion, we're now getting asked to look at these kinds of things much more vigorously than we ever had before.
So let me ask one question to Tony, and then we need some questions from the audience here, because you're probably tired of listening to us going on, et cetera. So Tony, let's say you're representing a hypothetical nursing home chain. They have 150, 200 buildings somewhere in the U.S. They're good operators. They're making money. They got a mix of, 4 or 5-star buildings. They don't have a lot of deficiencies. They rarely get an F tag. Everybody knows I'm talking about Nirvana nursing home, but anyhow, they got a lot of capital. They want to expand. They come to you. They want to hire you as a banker and say, look, we want to redeploy some of our, capital into some ancillary businesses. What would you tell them? What would you do?
Yeah, look, I would encourage it. Obviously, I would encourage structuring it correctly, and then I would, to Alan's earlier point, is really decide which other ancillary businesses make strategic sense for that party. What's not going to create a conflict, you know, if they choose to sell those services to other operators in the market, and how do they leverage their clinical and operations expertise? I mean, there's a couple of outside-the-box ancillary businesses that make a lot of sense, right? And we've seen it successful. We've seen a number of nursing home companies get into home care and hospice successfully. But there are also a number of ancillary businesses where it makes absolutely no sense because, once again, they don't have the size and the scale and the expertise to do it, especially on the recruiting, on the staff side. So my answer would be absolutely, but it all depends on what exactly they want to do and how do they leverage their expertise.
Got it. So how about we get some questions from the audience here? We've got about 9 minutes to go, so we'd really love to hear from you folks with some questions. You get free legal and banking advice while you're here. Okay, you can get my advice, which is not much, but so kind of questions that you might have from the audience. We need a few. Yeah, somebody have a roving mic? Good, thank you.
Thank you. So the lab space is missing from this conversation. And my question is that the lab space has always been traditionally a regional market with mobile phlebotomy and the like. But in the advent of COVID and now more diagnostic testing that can be done by mail, how does that change the game from regional players creating regional labs to regional labs now growing and taking on JVs on a national scale?
So look, as you and I talked about last night, we were in the lab space. I hated it, okay? And we were honest about it. It's a very difficult space because the reimbursement is very low, the staffing costs are very high, the logistics are very high, and the service demands are ranging from high to insane. But other than that, it's a really good business. And it's a shame because look, I'm putting my old hat on from when we were in the lab space and I did some lobbying on this. It's probably the most important ancillary service on a day-to-day basis in the nursing home in terms of keeping patients out of the hospital and healthy. The patient's got a problem. You want to get a PTI-NR. You see what their clotting levels are. Are they having a diabetic incident and all that stuff? So it's like a major. What's the first thing that happens when you go to the ER? After you do your paperwork, what do? They draw blood. Why? Because they don't know what they're looking for, so they draw the blood, they run it down, they do the stat lab, they do all the tests. So in a nursing home, lab is probably, my opinion, not want to offend my friends Avi or David, the most important ancillary, the most poorly reimbursed and the most challenged. I don't have an answer for it. I can envision some futures, and none of them are good, where nursing homes end up having to go back and do their own lab work like 40 years ago. Okay? Hospitals don't want to do it. LabCorp and Quest don't want to do it. BioReference, the third national lab, just got out of it. They had some regulatory problems, which you can read about online. So, of all the ancillary businesses, that's the one that I think is the most important in the nursing home and the most challenged. So you have my, Chutzpah of the Year award for staying in the business.
My question more is that now that we've able to grow past regional with COVID mailing the samples and things like that, how does that change the game regulatory-wise to bringing on JVs around the country? So in the past, it's been very regional, and our partners have been, as far as we can drive, for lack of a better term, and now being able to mail samples with turnaround times of 12 to 24 hours gives us the ability to reach outside of that driving radius. So how does that impact our partners legally?
One, I got to pass that one off to my colleague Alan because I've not thought about it. Because look, when I was in the lab business, it was such a crappy business, I couldn't find a joint venture partner if I begged. Okay? So
look, I mean, if the reason...
And I begged once or twice.
Right. So it all depends on the commercial justification for the business. If the commercial justification for the business and the venture is to take advantage of the referrals from the referral source, that's not a good fact. Now, the fact of the matter is that there has been an explosion of COVID testing. And most nursing facilities that I have come in contact with have difficulty getting their people tested, they have difficulty getting them tested on time. And so in this, the world that we live in today, where everybody that turns around is getting tested, whether it be staff members or vendors who come in or family members, yeah, there's a compelling justification to have a lab capacity within the nursing home to do that. Now, whether that kind of a justification can be nationalized or national in scope, it all depends on the execution. And if you end up in a situation where you have a very substantial number of unrelated customers who are not related to the people who own the joint venture, that's exactly the kind of things that I would want to look at and see and get more comfortable with in terms of the legitimacy of the joint venture.
Thank you.
Sure. Another question? We need one more question. Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Nope. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, just to help us out for a couple minutes here.
There he goes.
We need to run down the clock. It's some.
Yeah, don't worry. Alan knows how to run down the clock well.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay.
I told you I wasn't charging during this.
Well, let's see at the end of the month how that works out. So the question is, how are, I'm curious from Alan, we speak about this a lot, but I'm curious. You see a lot of different medical groups operating within nursing homes right now. And the issue of the self-referral seems to be this big gray space of, there's so many groups and many groups, physician groups, trying to do a lot of services that maybe they have expertise in, maybe they don't. And overall, there's also the issue that the role of the nurse practitioner is extremely undefined. So as we have more mid-levels in the space, they may be doing all sorts of different things that you would never expect. A primary care physician does primary care. A specialist physician keeps to his specialty. You see a lot of nurse practitioners now and these nurse practitioner groups operating in different spaces and then also sometimes referring to other nurse practitioners and mid-levels that are all in the same space. So, is there guidance put out on that? I guess it's an emerging problem, but it's something that, I see just gone wild, and I don't think everybody's recognized what's going on.
So let me give you a short answer to a very good question. The short answer to that question is that it is there's not a lot of guidance on that particular issue. It's a very complicated area because once you get involved in referrals, and then there's a stark issue with respect to different kinds of services. So there's not a simple and short answer to your question. But I will tell you one thing. There is one modality of service that if you are in a nursing home business and you're looking to get into that makes perfect sense to me, that would be the primary care physicians and nurse practitioners. Because forget about the pharmacy, forget about the therapy, forget about the labs in terms of all of those issues. Yes, there's some justification. But in my opinion, there is much more of a compelling justification to have the ability to have those physicians coming into your nursing home and the nurse practitioners coming into your nursing home, because frankly, the biggest issue that most nursing homes have is the inability to get physicians to come in and the inability to have nurse practitioners come in. And so the clinical justifications for doing those kinds of things and be able to control that, I think, is far more compelling on a regulatory kind of a basis than almost any other kind of modality. And what Tony will tell you is that the financial buyers and the strategic buyers are looking at these companies that are of scale in terms of the nurse practitioner businesses, and I think they're beginning to get they have some value associated with it.
So let me add one thing to Alan. We had a nurse practitioner company. We chose not to scale it. We sold it. We made a couple of dollars, et cetera. Somebody asked me 10 years ago or 20 years ago when I first got into the long-term care space, because I had worked a lot in acute care and large medical groups. How do you fix nursing homes? First of all, I didn't know they were broken, okay? I said, the problem in nursing homes is there's no doctors. Think about it. When was the last time anybody here that runs or operates, owns a nursing home, saw a cardiologist in a nursing home? physically, right? So nurse practitioners, you know, we thought when we did this 9 years ago was a great solution. And I think if I'm correct, services provided for nurse practitioners are not considered designated health services under Stark.
No, it's not.
Because a friend of mine who works for CMS wrote that regulation, so I'm pretty sure of it. So I happen to personally agree 3,000% with my colleague there that a great business is having nurse practitioners in the nursing home doing primary care. And this is a personal editorial statement, but I think if you have good nurse practitioners and you train them, that you will find that those nurse practitioners sort of grow into geriatric nurse practitioners and start doing more and more and more. They start doing routine foot care. They start doing routine dermatology. They start doing look, they're not going to do open heart surgery, okay? But if you want a good lobbying backer, the best lobbying group in Washington right now is the Nurse Practitioner Association. Absolutely the best. So to me, it's like the number one thing. If I owned a nursing home, you know, the number one thing I'd be investing in is a company, business, whatever, that had my nurse practitioner seeing my patients every day. Nothing bad comes of it. The patient gets better care. The nursing home gets F tags, Q tags, W tags, and all that stuff. Alan can structure it so it's a regulatory winner. And Tony, who I'll ask
Tony
now,
can sell it.
is saying people are spending lots of money to buy those companies. Right?
That's it.
So we'll talk. Anyhow, so look,
Excuse me.
I'm just look. I want to thank my panelists. I want to just go around, you know, one at a time, see if they have any concluding remarks and all that stuff. David,
Great to be on the panel. Alan, you did a great job. Alan, this Alan, you know, also really very interesting. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure, Alan, always.
thank you. It's my namesake. Thank you all for joining us.